Good evening and welcome to today's live session. As no learners have joined yet, I'll wait for 5 minutes to see if anyone joins and then I'll start the session. It is 5 minutes now, so I think we should start today's session. Uh, Today we'll be solving assignment 11 from week 11. So assignment 11 from the past runs, and this week the lectures that would have been covered include international conventions, laws, and emerging technologies for sustainable development. This you would have studied about different conventions on the international platforms set up by the United Nations or uh, UNFCCC and things. Different laws pertaining to those conventions. A little bit about which member countries follow which kind of laws and things, and then how different countries are performing. Then you would have studied a little bit about different new technologies that are emerging and how or what role those technologies play in furthering the goals of sustainable development. Next, you would have studied environmental laws. This you would have studied the different environmental laws and codes pertaining to the Indian context. You would have studied various laws when they were enacted, what their intent is, and things like that. And the last lecture is emerging technologies and their possible intervention in design. Again, I have studied a little bit in detail about the different emerging technologies technologies that exist and how they can guide your design process. So we'll jump right into the questions. So first question for today's session is, which year saw the major changes in climate change negotiations? We're given four options: 1992, 1995, 1990, and 1985. So this is the question is asking about change in climate negotiations. So you can see here in this small timeline that we have shown here that the climate change negotiations they took a turn in 1992 when the framework for international climate action was introduced by the United Nations, which is known as the UNFCCC. So before 1992, there was no such framework, and although there were still talks and negotiations surrounding sustainable development or climate change, but no streamlined or any kind of step towards this direction had not taken up until then. In 1992, with the introduction of UNFCCC, uh, the way in which climate change negotiations are handled on the global scale changed. And so the answer for this question is 1992. You would have studied this timeline in your lectures. So I won't explain it in detail, but just to give you a general idea, in 1992 the UNFCCC was introduced, uh, which is the original climate treaty uh, proposed by the United Nations. It established the basic frameworks and principles for international cooperation and collaboration for tackling climate change action. Then in 1997, following more negotiation processes and uh, following more negotiation processes on the global scale, the need was felt to have a legally binding agreement, because before this, the UNFCCC, it is just a framework, and countries had the choice of agreeing and supporting the framework, but the framework was not legally binding. However, in later negotiations, it was felt that there was a strong need for a legally binding protocol. So, because of that, the Kyoto Protocol was introduced in 1997, and it requires industrialized countries to make collective binding emission cut of 5% or below. 5% below the 1990 levels by the year 2012. So after that, in 2009, the Copenhagen Accord was established, and then the new global treaty was established in 2015, or which you might also know as the COP17. Uh, there were several other events also, several smaller landmarks which happened along the line in these climate negotiations. If you want further detail, you can look into it, and you can read about the particular agreements and frameworks if you would like to do. So this is just a reference diagram of what all reference diagram to clarify the timeline of how different negotiations and agreements came along historically. So if you want to see further details of any of these, you can just go search the particular agreement and read further about it. So coming to the next question. So our next question is Annex 1 countries are dash countries that has contributed to most GHG emissions since the Industrial Revolution. So it is asking if the Annex 1 countries are developing countries or are they developed countries or all of the above. So are they both developing and developed countries or neither of them? So does it not refer to their developed or developing status or so for this we need to see the categorization in which the UNFCCC categorizes all the parties and observers of this framework. So the different parties which observe this framework, they have been categorized into three parts: Annex 1, Annex 2 and non-Annex 1 parties. So Annex 1 parties, these include the industrialized countries that were members of the OECD. OECD is an organization for economic cooperation and development. So Annex 1 includes, so it was, as you can see, it was an organization for cooperation, global cooperation, which predated the framework. So once the framework was introduced, all the members of the OECD, so this international uh, cooperation agreement, all the members of this uh, uh, organization in 1992, plus some other countries in which were in transition. So they were transitioning from developing status to developed status, including countries like the Russian Federation, the Baltic states, and several Central and Eastern European states. They were uh, they they formed the part of Annex 1 parties. So you can see these are uh, developed, these are mostly developed countries and some of the countries which are in transition. So they are developing, but you can largely consider them to be developed. So answer for this question is developed. Annex 1 countries are developed countries that have contributed to most GHG emissions since the Industrial Revolution. Then there is Annex 2. So Annex 2 consists of the OECD members of Annex 1, but not the transitioning parties. So they are required to provide financial resources to enable developing countries to undertake uh, emission reduction activities under this convention and to help uh, the other countries to adapt to adverse effect of climate change. Then there is non-Annex 1 parties. So these are mostly developing countries who are observers of this framework. So non-Annex 1 are mostly developing countries who are observers of the UNFCCC framework, and certain groups of developing countries are recognized by convention as being specially vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, uh, which includes countries which have low-lying coastal areas and which are prone to desertification and drought. So this consists of the non-Annex 1 countries. If you want to read further about this classification of different observers, you can visit this link that I have provided here. So this will take you to the UNFCCC's website. They have detailed out the different parties and what these categorization. You can even go to the further information about the observer organizations that exist. You can just click on this link and so if you read any further about this categorization, you can just click on to that link and we'll move on to the next question. So, third question is the objective of Kyoto Protocol is to dash parties towards realizing their emission reduction target. So, is it to encourage? Is it to make them aware or raise awareness? Is it to create a conglomerate, or is it to legally bind the parties? So, as we saw in earlier also when we were studying the timeline, that the Kyoto Protocol is basically introduced as a protocol which will legally bind uh, some of the developed economies towards realizing their emission reduction target. It was introduced on 11 December 1997, but was introducing such a global scale legally binding protocol. There are the ratification process which is involved is quite complex. Therefore, even after being introduced in 1997, it only came into force on 16 February 2005. What it does is that it basically operationalizes the framework, which is the UNFCCC, by committing the industrialized countries and economies in transition, so the EITs, to limit and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in accordance to agreed individual targets for each of the countries. The convention itself only asks those countries to adopt policies and measures on mitigation and to report periodically, but in addition to the convention, the Kyoto Protocol legally binds uh, these countries to reduce their GHG emission. So the Kyoto Protocol is basically based on principles and provisions of the convention, and it follows an annex-based structure which we just saw. It only binds the developed countries, as I just said, and doesn't bind all of the countries which are observers of the convention, but only the developed countries, as they are the countries which have had the most impact on uh, they have had the most greenhouse gas emissions and thus the most impact on the climate change. This is based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, which I just mentioned. Please give me 1 moment. So sorry for the interruption. Coming back, so we were discussing that the Kyoto Protocol, it basically follows the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. So what this means is that because different economies in the world, they are differentially responsible for the climate change that is occurring, as the larger industrialized economies, uh, they have had more of an impact on the climate change because of their large amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So they are, according to this principle, they assume a greater responsibility towards uh, uh, towards meeting this emission reduction target, and not only uh, because of their larger emission, but because of their respective capabilities also. So these larger industrialized economies, they have capacity and more capabilities of achieving this emission reduction target as compared to other developing or underdeveloped economies in the world. That is why they assume a greater responsibility, and thus the Kyoto Protocol, it sets binding emission reduction targets for 37 of these industrialized countries and economies in transition, and the European. So overall, these targets add up to an average of 5% emission reduction compared to the 1980 levels over the 5-year period of 2008 to 2012, which is called the first commitment. There are commitments after this period also, but this is the first commitment period for which uh, protocol was introduced. So I think it is pretty clear that the objective of the Kyoto Protocol is to legally bind the parties towards realizing their emission reduction target. So legally bind is the answer to this question. Moving on to the next question. The functional component of Kyoto Protocol mechanism are emission trading, clean development mechanism, and dash. Then you are given four options: joint implementation, impact assessment, reduction, economical assessment. So one important element of the Kyoto Protocol is that it was with the Kyoto Protocol, flexible market mechanisms were also established, which are based on trade emission permits. So, under the protocol, countries must meet their targets primarily through national measures. However, just to have more flexible market mechanisms, so in order for these economies to have a little flexibility in adaptation, the protocol also offers them an additional means to meet their targets by way of three market-based mechanisms. So first is international emissions trading, second is the clean development mechanism, and third is the joint implementation mechanism. So I think you get the answer to this question of what the third mechanism is. So what these mechanisms do, that they encourage the GHG abatement to start where it's most cost effective. Uh, for example, in the developing world. So many a times, in order to undertake uh, undertake the objectives of emission reduction, it is cheaper or more cost effective to undertake some of the objectives in the developing world instead of the developed world. So, in that scenario, flexible market mechanisms have been established, like emission trading, so that actually uh, the groundwork for the emission reduction will be done in the developing country, and some exchanges or some emission trading exchanges will be made by the one or multiple developed countries with the developing countries in order for them to achieve the emission reduction target. This has parallel benefits for stimulating green investment in developing countries as well, including the private sector in this endeavor to cut and hold the steady GHG emissions at a safe level. It also makes leapfrogging, that is, possibility of skipping the use of older, dirtier technology for newer, cleaner infrastructure and systems with longer term benefits, and thus which are moving. So, following this, the developing economies, they don't have to go the earlier route of first using the older and emission intensive technology and then transition to cleaner energy systems. Rather, some leapfrogging can be done if such kind of international emission trading or joint implementation programs uh, are being entered by them with the developed economies. So I've also provided links for each of this mechanism. So these links will take you to the pages which explain in detail what each of these mechanisms are. So for example, this is the emission trading. So parties with commitments to the protocol, they have accepted targets for limiting their emission, but these targets are expressed in terms of units or assigned amounts over the first commitment period, and this assigned amount is called AAUs, or the assigned amount units. So what emission trading basically does is that it allows these countries that have more emission units to spare emissions permitted but not used, and to sell this excess capacity to countries who do not have so much emission amount units, so that excess capacity can be transferred to those countries, and targets can thus be achieved. So this basically creates a new commodity in the form of an emission reduction or removal. And since CO2 is a principal greenhouse gas, people speak in terms of carbon trading. So you would have heard of that term carbon trading as well, which is nothing but emission trading in essentiality. So other trading also exist in the carbon market, and those are mentioned here. For example, removal unit RMU, it's based on land use and land use change in forestry activities such as reforestation. So if you see things like this, it is easier and more cost effective to conduct these kinds of objectives or tasks in a developing country rather than a developed country. So I hope you get the idea of how this flexible market mechanism actually helps both the developing and developed countries better and efficiently and cost effectively achieve their targets. So there are more details on this. Similarly, you can see the development mechanism as well. That link just explains the green mechanism, and similarly there is joint implementation. So let me take you to the joint implementation. I hope this helps. So if you want to further detail about various mechanisms, you can just visit on to 3 links, and understand these mechanisms. So, moving on to the next question. So, the next question is India is dash largest country for GHG emission in 2000. This question is basically talking about rankings in terms of GHG emission or how much GHG emission different countries have. So, uh, if you visit any of these links, these will take you to websites which display these global rankings. So, for example, this is WRI or World Resources Institute. It displays this page displays the global ranking of the top 10 economies and how much they emit or how where they rank in terms of their greenhouse gas emission. So you can see China is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, followed by the United States, and third position is India. But you, as saw in the question coming back, the question is asking about 2014. However, uh, this data is actually for 2019. So periodically, sorry, these assessments are done periodically, sometimes annually. Thus, global ranking can vary from year to year. This is one example I am showing you, which is for year 2019. In this ranking, India is on the third position. However, the question asks about the year 2014. So, year 2014, India is ranking fourth, or it's the fourth largest country for GHG. I have provided another link for World Bank GHG emission data. So if you click on through to this link, it will take you to the World Bank repository, which stores all the GHG emission data for different countries all over the world. And this is also time series data, so you can get this data for different periods. So this is 2014 as mentioned, as we saw. So you can see these seem to be the highest emitting countries, and you can see the emission of United States, then of India, China, and then if you consider the whole. So similarly, you can see the data for other years also. You can see the emission data for other years also. So you can see this is for 2012, 5, emission projection is a huge emitter, 2005, and then you can see emissions for 2015. So I hope this helps. So for 2014, in that question we have already, but apart from that, if you want to see further global emissions, different countries, for the globe, see, there are even diagrams. So this will tell you the whole world's greenhouse gas emission. There are even bar graphs which can help see visualize the data. You can also see the emissions of individual countries. So if, for example, see Austria's emission. So this shows till from 1990 to 2019, how benches changed. So, change this period and get the data. I hope this helps. If you further into getting different options, you can use this website. You can even get data. Can, uh, uh, download this data from Excel form. So conduct some study if you want to do some analysis using this data. Download this world bank data. You can do this. I hope that helps. Coming back to our question, India was the fourth largest emitter of gas emissions in the year. This is clear. Next question. So the next question is BIM stands for what and what? Four options: basic impact modeling, building information model, building impact model, or basic information model. So BIM basically is building information model, which is the answer to your question. It's a foundation of digital transformation and architecture in construction industry or AEC industry. So it is a BIM is a process of creating and managing all the information related to the building or for a built asset based on intelligent model enabled by a cloud platform. So it integrates structured and multidisciplinary data of related to all the building to produce a digital representation of an asset across its entire life cycle. So not just the design we are making at one particular point, but it can even generate representation for the whole life cycle from planning to design, construction, and then to completion. So earlier, what issue was there that although we knew a lot about buildings functioning, it is not easily visualized, although we know about the different systems which are part of a building, but it is not easy to visualize them using general drafting and other techniques, but using building information models, it is easier to visualize uh, all of the different data related to a building and to represent that data into a visual form. So because of that, BIM has several benefits, like it can help you connect teams, workflows, and data for across the entire project lifecycle. This can be done right from the designing and engineering to even to the construction and production. It is used for creating and managing data during the design, construction, and production process, and it integrates multidisciplinary data to create digital representations that are managed in a platform, which can be used for real-time collaboration. Using BIM, it gives you greater visibility of your project. Which can help you in better decision making for different phases of your project, and it help you select sustainable options and more cost-effective options. So it involves, as I mentioned, it uh, can be used throughout the life cycle of the project, so from planning to designing and then to operating. So during planning, it can help you from the project that by reality to generate the context model of the existing tool. During designing, it helps to base conceptual designs, analyze them, detail out part and documentation also. and pre-construction process, the BIM data to inform to also inform scheduling and logistics in different parts of the project. And then during the build phase, fabrication begins using the BIM specifications, and project construction logistics are also shared. Can also be shared with trades and contractors to ensure optimum timing and efficiency during the build-up. Then obviously data carries over to team or is in charge of that finishing asset, and this data can be used for the cost-effective so efficient deconstruction of the. I hope just clear to you what BIM is. BIM is basically how to optimize the building, the planning design, optimizing of the building process. Hope that's clear. We'll move on to the next question. So the next question is, what percentage of aluminum is recycled at the end of life or use? So this question is basically talking, it's not talking about general use of aluminum, but the aluminum that is in building industry. So it's a highly sought after also for building tall and large buildings or skyscrapers. Uh, it is the material of choice while such huge structures. It's because aluminum products are weatherproof and corrosion resistant and have exceptionally high strength to weight ratio, and it is also flexible for designing light structures with greater design flexibility. So because of that, aluminum is a material of choice while designing skyscrapers, and also because it is seen as a more sustainable alternative compared to other materials, because 95% of the aluminum which is used in the building is recycled at the end of its life or at the end of its use, according to a study. So uh, that way also it proves to be a very sustainable option for using skyscrapers and other. So I hope you get your answer to this question, which is 95%. So this is basically asking you about the aluminum used in buildings. So for that, the answer is 95%. I hope that is clear. The next question. So this question is asking uh, the positive impact of AI in achieving sustainable development goals is what? That is asking you in percentages, options 79, 90, 56, and 87%. Tell what is the positive impact of it. So AI is a new technology, and you might be aware that any new technology, when it is introduced, it can have both negative and both positive and negative effects on uh, the development process and things like achieving the sustainable. So this question is based on a paper or a study which has been done. I have linked the study here. Click on through and visit. So what this study does is that it assesses the role of AI in achieving sustainable development. So it sees all the different goals, and it sees in that it categorizes them based on the environmental goals, society goals, and economic goals. And based on that, how positively or negatively AI can affect all of these goals. So this is the study in detail. If you want to see in detail of how AI can affect each of the uh, goals, so can can enable can be either an enabler or an inhibitor So in that way, the study details out uh, how AI can be both beneficial and negative for achieving the SDGs. You can go further to this study if you want to see the details. Uh, but what our question asks is the overall positive impact. So you can see from this diagram here that the overall positive impact is 79%. So this is the answer to your question. If you want to see in detail how AI is affecting the achievement of sustainable development, please visit this link. On to the next question. So next question is the comparative assessment of government strategies and policy action for climate mitigation of India is you're given four options. Is it critically insufficient? Is it highly insufficient? Is it a role model, or is it 2-degree compatible? So 2-degree compatible is basically it's referring to the goal of reducing emissions, or uh, reducing the temperature below 2 degree, or limiting it to 2 degree and below. So this actually comes from a website which is known as the Climate Action Tracker. I've attached the link to that website here. So this is the website, and this tracks the action taken by different countries, different economies in the field of climate action. So because the question asks about India, uh, it's it is and see India's status. So right now, our performance is highly inefficient. So uh, the last assessment was for 15th November 2022. According to this, our performance is highly insufficient, and they have different metrics like policies in action, or conditional NDC targets, or unconditional NDC's targets, or climate finance. So we measure it for each of these metrics. So you can see in details the metrics here as well. Then you can download this data if you want, and then it gives you an overview of this assessment. So so uh, although the question which is being asked doesn't mention the year or the time period about which it is asking, but according to the answers, it is talking about uh, the year 2022, where India's performance was 2-degree compatible. So, what 2-degree compatible means is that the performance is consistent with the 2009 Copenhagen uh, degree goal, and therefore it falls within the country's fair share range. But it is not fully consistent with the Paris Agreement, uh, the long-term temperature goal, and the government NDCs were in this range. Warming could be held below, but not well below the 2-degree Celsius rise which is to be expected. So this is the summary for 2020 to which the question pertains. You can see the details here. So the answer to this question is 2-degree compatible because it is talking about the 2020. But as I showed you, you can go and see the performance over different periods of time as well. So I hope this helps. The last question for today. So this question asks that the EPA, or the Environmental Protection Act, which asks about the year or which year it was introduced, and provides the protection and defense. So EPA was introduced in the year 1986, as you can see from snippet. I've also attached the link to the act, so you can just visit this link uh, for the CPCB's website, and you can access the act here and wait if you need further details of that. I hope this question is also clear. Uh, that is all for today. Thank you very much for attending today's sessions. I'll take any questions if there are any questions. I see Arvind and Yash. If you have any questions, please just type your questions in the chat box. Doesn't have any questions. Arvind, do you have any questions? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for attending. I think we'll close the session for today then. If you have any further questions after that also, you can please ask them on the forum. So thank you so much for attending and see you in the next session.